Welcome to episode 1. Today, we're going right to the root. If we're going to dismantle the lie that you are broken by design and that your history is a sentence that you have to serve for the rest of your life, we have to look at where the story actually starts. Not just mine, but yours. Before we dive into my story, I want you to pause for just a moment and think about your own. What is the narrative you've quietly accepted about where you come from? What are the labels you've worn, the excuses you've made for the pain in your chest, or the invisible ceiling that you've assumed you'll never break through? Most of us walk around carrying the blueprints of our childhoods like a permanent map, never realizing that we're actually allowed to throw those maps away. When people talk about generational trauma, they make it sound like a ghost that haunts you, an unbreakable chain welded to our DNA. But I don't believe in generational curses. We talk about trauma like it's a permanent physical diagnosis. But so often, what we are really fighting are unexamined traditions handed down from a generation that was just trying to survive. We inherit the traditions of just staying quiet to keep the peace. The traditions of numbing the hard days with a bottle or a distraction or even a compulsive habit. The traditions of working ourselves into the ground because worth had to be earned. Or accepting emotional starvation because we didn't believe that we deserved a seat at the table. We inherit the traditions of reactive anger, of hiding our messes behind closed doors, of believing that love always has to hurt a little bit before it feels safe. I believe in traditions. I believe in learned patterns, survival loops, and the ways we try to outrun our pain. And traditions? Traditions can be broken. To show you how, I want to take you back to where my story began. Not with my own birth, but with 2 kids who had no idea what they were walking into. They didn't know the invisible weight they were carrying would eventually become the atmosphere of our home. They didn't know that the unresolved pain of their own childhood would quietly cross the threshold into ours. But every single one of us starts somewhere in the rubble. And today, we're going to look right at this rubble. Not to stay here, but to finally see the way out. My father was born in Pennsylvania. When he was just 2.5 years old, his biological father passed. Imagine that kind of vacuum, that early foundational loss of a father at an age when a little boy is just learning what the world is. That sudden absence leaves a quiet, gaping hole, shaping how a child learns to navigate the world. How a little boy looks for stable footing before he even has the words to understand what he's missing. His first stepdad was a hard-working dairy farmer. The household was wrapped up in a heavy, chaotic party lifestyle. Lots of drinking, drugs, and domestic abuse behind closed doors. When that marriage collapsed, my grandmother and her 6 children were plunged into extreme poverty. She remarried, and the cycle simply repeated itself. Another abusive home, another heavy party culture. My mother's story had a different backdrop, but a similar shadow. Born and raised in Ohio, her mother was an addict and mostly absent from her life. leaving a deep wound of abandonment. In fact, so much of my child's motherhood is hazy. Blank spaces left behind because of the physical abuse she endured. It was so severe that her mind simply built walls to protect her. When she did see her biological mother, it was often at her mother's home, where my grandmother would be heavily intoxicated. That heartbreaking reality culminated in a tragedy. When my mother was around 16 years old, her mother passed away in a devastating house fire. They believe she dropped a cigarette after passing out from drunkenness, and the fire consumed the house with my grandmother inside of it. Her father remarried, and her stepmother was abusive in every conceivable way, physically, emotionally, and mentally. They weren't in extreme poverty. There was food on the table, and there was clothes on their backs, but they lived under a tight, suffocating budget. Entirely void of emotional safety. In a home like that, love is never freely given. It has to be earned. There was no soft place to land when the world bruised them, no anchor to steady them, and no warmth to counteract the constant chill of walking on eggshells. My mom had to navigate unimaginable loss and instability entirely on her own, carrying the invisible scars of abandonment, abuse, and profound grief. She learned early on that the world was an unsafe place where she had to fight just to survive. They were two kids carrying a quiet, heavy devastation. They met early in life, and they fell in love, and they got married in 1977. They thought they had found hope when they met each other. They thought they found the missing pieces to their hearts. Desperate for a better life and a fresh start, my father joined the military, and to their immense credit, they made a massive, intentional break. They drew a hard line in the sand, and they left all of the violence behind them. They buried all of that physical abuse, refusing to let the brutal domestic warfare of their own childhoods cross the threshold of their marriage. They didn't just want to escape the pain. They wanted to rewrite their entire legacies. They wanted a genuinely peaceful home, a sanctuary where their future children would never have to flinch at a slammed door or live in terror of the next explosion. They were determined to build a better life, believing that with a clean slate, they could give their kids the safety and stability that they had both been denied. But they kept that party lifestyle. They kept the poverty mindset. They kept the passivity. When you're a young child watching your parents, you don't really have the filter to understand what you're seeing. You just absorb it all as reality. To us, it appeared that our parents and other family members were just having fun. Just like children like to run around and be obnoxious, that's what they were doing. And we thought that they were just having fun. The reality was that this party lifestyle actually looked more like adults running around, being completely obnoxious and intoxicated, playing loud music and dancing in the yard. They had no sense of shame, no sense of boundaries, and they had very little dignity. They had no real sense of any danger. Now, the poverty mindset meant money leaked through their fingers. Any cash that somehow made its way into their hands was never spent wisely, because deep down, there was no real belief that a better financial future was possible. They did the best that they knew with very little resources. And then the passivity. The passivity was staggering. The way that they just accepted things. Because we weren't being beaten or terrorized the way that they had been, my parents genuinely thought they had arrived. In their minds, they looked at the wreckage of their own childhoods and looked at us and thought, we made it. We're doing better. They couldn't see the quiet, slow burning neglect happening right beneath their noses. Because the abuse was absent, they assumed everything else was fine. And the neglect simply became the normal, accepted atmosphere of our home. My biological brother and I were raised with love. We had family all around us, aunts, uncles, cousins. They all loved us very deeply. We went without a lot of essentials, but we had love. My parents loved us and cared for us the best way that they knew how. For a long time, that love felt like enough. It insulated us. Until the line between a carefree, laid-back lifestyle and sheer neglect started to blur. As kids, we didn't have any idea. We thought our world was normal. We didn't look at our bare cupboards and think, we're poor. We just thought that's what life looked like. But the outside world sees things differently. I remember being in the 5th grade when a social worker first pulled me aside and questioned me at school. Suddenly, it was like I was jolted to wake to the judgment of the outside world, looking in at our reality, sitting across that desk, answering questions about things a child shouldn't have to think about. What do you usually eat for dinner? Do you have any clean clothes at home? Are there adults drinking around you? I realized for the first time that our normal wasn't actually normal. That wouldn't be the last time that I was questioned by a CPS worker. Around that same time, the blinders came off in many other ways. The cruel reality of childhood social circles hit me. I realized that the kids I thought were my friends were laughing at me, not with me. And at home, the pressure was mounting. My brother had been a sickly baby, and that vulnerability followed him. Every single winter, he was hospitalized for long stretches with severe lung issues. The stress on the family was immense. But the partying never stopped. In fact, it escalated, turning into a revolving door of self-destruction. The cupboards grew more and more barren, and the illusion of our carefree lifestyle started to crack completely. It always seemed to follow a familiar, destructive loop. My dad would push things too far, catch a criminal charge, and find himself forced into a corner. Out of options, he would head off to rehab. He tried really hard. He fought tooth and nail against his demons, wrestling with desires to self-medicate. He really didn't have the tools to conquer these things. Often, those cycles started long before anybody packed a bag for treatment center. My dad would just disappear for long periods of time. Sometimes it was just a few days. Sometimes it stretched out across a week or longer. We wouldn't know where he was. We wouldn't know if he was safe. And we wouldn't find out until we got a phone call revealing that he was actually incarcerated. My mother partied too. But her addiction, it looked a little different. It was adultery. She was looking for love, validation, and self-worth in all of the wrong places, trying to fill an internal void that nothing external could touch. This was our life. None of us knew a better life existed. If you've ever lived through something like that, you know that people don't usually just sit passively in the wreckage. They look for a way out. I remember seeing pastors come and go. I remember going to church every once in a blue moon, especially around the times that my dad was heading into rehab. Looking back, I can see my parents searching. All through my childhood, they were desperately looking for freedom and for real peace, trying to find a way out of the fog. They wanted a better life. They wanted a better life for us. They just didn't have the tools. If you grew up in a home where chaos was loud or the neglect was quiet, you know what it does to a child. It teaches you to survive. It teaches you to stay small, to read the room, to carry a weight that was never yours to hold. For a long time, the world tells kids from environments like this is your blueprint. This is your inheritance. They'll hand you a diagnosis of a generational dysfunction and tell you to manage the symptoms for the rest of your life. I'm here to tell you that diagnosis is a lie. You see, human traditions and learned chaos can run deep, but they are no match for redemption. Throughout my life, I watched my parents search for peace in all the wrong places. But the story didn't end in those barren cupboards or the hospital room. They did all they could to make a very broken relationship work. My dad being absent the majority of the relationship, and my mother seeking love for all of that time that my father was absent. They tried really hard. They went to church. They went to the gym. They studied the Bible together. And they put a lot of effort in, but it wasn't enough. They still had so many traditions in their minds and so many holes in what real redemption and love looks like. They were void of real peace and real love. In 2003, they separated and filed for divorce after 26 years. Today, both of my parents are remarried, whole, and devoted wholeheartedly to the Lord. I honor and adore them in every single way. The Lord walked us through a profound journey of grace and forgiveness. He took everything that was stolen from our family, every lost year, every broken expectation, every piece of that wreckage, and He restored it tenfold. God literally made beauty out of our ashes. If you're standing in the middle of your own wreckage today, surrounded by the debris of broken choices, generational patterns, or a life that looks nothing like you ever hoped it would, please hear this. The mess you're standing in is not the end of your story, and it does not define your worth. You are never too far gone for redemption. We live in a culture that tries to hand us tidy formulas, as if healing is a straight line and freedom is just a few positive affirmations away. But real life is messy. Sometimes you survive a childhood built on sand. Sometimes you repeat cycles that you swore you never would. And sometimes you look around and you wonder, how did you end up carrying so much? And that's precisely where Jesus meets you. He doesn't stand at a distance, waiting for you to clean up your act and sort out your past. He steps right into the ash and the ruins. Even if you built the fire yourself, or if they were handed to you by people who should have protected you, grace meets you right there in the ash. You don't have to clean yourself up before you step into a better life. You don't have to pretend the pain didn't happen And you certainly don't have to carry the shame of yesterday into tomorrow. A hard past does not lock you into a hopeless future. The line can stop with you. The cycle can be broken right here in this exact breath by choosing to turn toward hope, toward truth, and toward that stubborn belief that your life is worth believing. You are not too far gone, and it is never too late to begin again. So, if you're standing in the middle of wreckage today, wondering if the cycle stops with you, take a breath. It does. God is the one who makes all things new and who stands ready to rewrite your story from the inside out. Over the next episodes, we're going to walk out of this fog together. Welcome to the journey. Let's turn the lights on.